All right, so I wanted to talk about this because this is sort of news in the comedy world. And I do comedy and part of that world, so I wanted to talk about it. So some of you guys know, probably read the Times last week, saw Eddie Brill's comments in the profile they did about him as the booker for David Letterman, the comedy booker. And there was a big sort of kerfuffle that came afterwards because he had made some comments about women in comedy when asked why there were only something like 3 women on Letterman in 2011 as far as all the comedians he booked. He said basically something that about women not being as authentic or vulnerable as men on stage, and also that female comedians often act like men on stage in order to please their audience. That's roughly verbatim, but you should read the article if you're interested. So while I am never a fan of a comedian losing his or her job for shooting their mouth off, because that's what comedians are there for, that's what they do, when your job is to book other comedians and you are not booking a specific segment of comedians, you're not doing your job. I mean, because you work for a corporation that wants to make money ultimately, right? So if half of your audience is women, and you know, according to one of my gay male friends who says I only like female comedians, there are plenty of other men, gay or not gay, who want to see female comedians. If you are not bringing them what they want, then you're not doing your job. So unfortunately, a personal bias, and again, I don't understand why he needed to say that. All he had to say was there just weren't as many good females last year, you know, as there were guys, you know, and everyone would have been like, oh, okay, you know, hey, things happen, right? But instead he needed to make it this qualitative, you know, statement about women in comedy, that he needed to use this as his platform for, which just doesn't really make any sense. I mean, first of all, women act like men, okay, women's and gender studies, let's just pass that one up, to please their audience. What comedian doesn't want to please their audience? All right. I kind of think that's the job description, actually. If you please an audience, you're a fucking comedian, right? Doesn't matter if you rant, if you write jokes meticulously, if you do characters, if you just act like a fucking fool. If people are laughing at you and paying you, congratulations, you're a comedian. In fact, it seems like Eddie Brill lost his job because he wasn't pleasing his audience in terms of bringing them what they wanted in comedy. And of course, there aren't any poll numbers to say what his audience wanted, but I mean, come on, they're not just, you know, college-aged men watching Letterman, because I've seen it before, and last I checked, right? And you know, I hear this argument still, and I don't understand why it still exists. I mean, first of all, newspapers need to stop printing this as news. It's not news, okay? Hitchens put that article out. It was his own personal editorial. Everyone went, you know, about it, and like, stop trying to redo this thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's not news. It's like, you know, Mel Gibson saying that he hates black people. Again, you know, it's not news. There isn't anybody on the planet who doesn't know this already. Like, you know, stop trying to inflame people with this. But I understand that, you know, Eddie made this comment, not Jason Zinnemann, who wrote the article, right? So, you know, he just printed what the news was. But, you know, when I go out and perform, you know, even sometimes internationally, especially in other countries, I always get shock and awe that I'm actually funny and I have a vagina. What? I mean, especially from women, especially from reactionary women who are like, oh yeah, you know, women aren't really that funny. And then I go out there and wipe the floor with all the other fucking male comics. And then they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm an artist and I'm good at what I do. You know what I mean? And in fact, people who say that women aren't funny are fucking dumb, all right? Because think about it. You would never say that, like, you know, like, people say that female comics aren't as good as male comics, but like, no one's ever going to say like, oh, you know, female painters aren't as good as male painters. Female singers aren't nearly as good as male singers. No, they have different qualities. They do different stuff. I mean, is Emo Phillips as funny as, you know, Nick DiPaolo? Do you know what I mean? Is Kristen Shaw as funny as Sarah Silverman? Like, they're different. They do different things. They have different audiences and different styles, and they're needed. No one's ever going to say Jackson Pollock isn't nearly as talented as Picasso. They do different things, you know? Like, think about the argument that you're making before you actually open your mouth about it. And also, I would add, I mean, just think about the comedians that you love, and think about the fact that probably the majority of them are minorities, right? They're black, they're Jewish, they're gay, they're Latino, they're short, they're fat, they're bald, they're handicapped, they're women, right? They're people who come from a marginalized background and a point of view that causes them to need to speak, to need to make people listen to their point of view, because they have been sitting on the sidelines in life while other people have been able to live it fully, and they have been, you know, yeah, resentful and hurting and thoughtful and observing, and they can then report that back to us, how we look, what we do. They make us feel like we're not alone in the universe because we can connect to them as individual human beings. That's what a comedian does, right? And we need all kinds of comedians in order to do that, right? And I would even go farther than that to say that I think that comedy is a feminine trait. I mean, just think about it. If we're going to take that sexist anthropological stance on it, which I think is just as effective as any other, right? I mean, come on, using your words instead of actions in order to get what you want. Come on, what's more feminine than that? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, like, think about it. For all these, like, you know, sexist male comedians, and there are some who really do think that they are God's gift to comedy just because they have a dick and they can't get laid with it, so they go up to a mic and talk into a dick, and then that's supposed to work. But think about it. Think about the action of comedy, right? So, I mean, let's first of all admit it's a compulsion. It is a need on the part of the comedian to be able to speak to people and to do it in such a way that pleases them, in order to get them to listen. So, you know, you got this comedian, right, you know, and he has a shitty boss, and instead of standing up to his boss or nutting up and just doing his job well enough so his boss doesn't complain, he's got to go, you know, go run home, write about it in his little journal like a bitch, right? And while he's at it, why does he get that nagging girlfriend in there too? Because honestly, if he could just fuck her, well, she probably wouldn't be nagging. But as it is, he's, I gotta write some more jokes about it, she sucks, ha ha ha, everyone's gonna love this. And instead of actually talking to the people in his life that are bothering him, he's gonna go run and tell everybody else about them, right? And try to get them to laugh at them and be on his side. Isn't that terrible, right? Right? Don't you hate it when they do this, right? Right? Like a fucking little gossipy bitch, alright? So let's just come off our fucking high horse about comedy, alright? It is not fucking sainthood. We are not fucking saving lives through medicine or faith or healing. Like, we are making people feel like people and safe, and you know, we're keeping them maybe from uprising, or maybe we're inspiring them to, right? But what we do is art, and it's about thought, and it's about society and progress. And if you are not for that, like, you know, across the board, then you're fucking it up, all right? Like, let's just come out and say it. People who have this opinion are bigots. That is the definition of bigotry. And I understand that comedy is the last vestige of bigotry, you know, because you're allowed to just be like, oh, you're funny, you're not funny. Like, comedy and sex are the last vestiges of bigotry, where you can just be like, I like this and I don't like this. And that's fine. You can like whatever you want, but to come out and qualitatively say that something is good and something else is not good, it's just like, that makes you prejudiced. And I understand, because we are all bigots and we all have our prejudices and we all have these things that feel familiar to us, that feel like core values, right? But that doesn't make them right, because we are human beings, and we are the beings that have both an old brain and a new brain. We have the things that feel gut and feel core, and we also have the ability to make a choice. Right? So, at the end of the day, you got to choose who the hell you're going to be and how the hell you're going to look at the world. If you're going to open that door in your mind and you're going to look at things equally and question yourself, or if you're going to go with a gut feeling and make a choice and go out there, rant at the world and, you know, say this is right and this is wrong forever and a day. You can choose who you're going to be, but just come out and say, look, I'm prejudiced and here's my prejudice, or look, I can be wrong. That's really all I have to say about the subject, except for stop being a whiny little bitch and just enjoy the joke.